Okay. O Bhagavad Gita, by which Arjuna was illumined by Lord Krishna himself, and which was composed of 18 chapters within the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. O Divine Mother, destroyer of rebirth, who showers the nectar of oneness upon us. O Bhagavad Gita, my affectionate mother, on thee I meditate. O the Upanishads are the cows, the milker is the cowherd boy Krishna, Arjuna is the calf, people of purified intellect are the drinkers, and the milk is the supreme nectar of the Gita. My salutations to the Lord, who is the bestower of supreme bliss, whose grace makes the mute eloquent and the crippled cross mountains. Hari Om Tat Sat. So, our dear Mukti is with us this morning. Actually, physically, maybe a little bit later in the day, but he's committed himself to service of the mission, and the particular role that he offered to play is related to taking these teachings on the Gita and the other teachings that are on offer, and crafting them. So he's taking this particular section of the satsang with an introduction and an outro, and very professionally, very nicely preparing them so that they can be offered as a series online on YouTube. So in the Zoom age, also the YouTube age, also the kind of past the Facebook age. We're still old. We still do Facebook, so all those who join us online. Oh, there we go. So, his suggestion here, and he's very much participating. And if we look at Facebook, we'll see he makes comments every day, every other day, something like that, through the process. So he sent me yesterday, and I responded back to him this morning. He sent last night some suggestion on the titles for each of the 6 chapters so far, and there was a question about the title for the first chapter. So, and it gets translated different ways. Often something like this: the yoga of the despondency of Arjuna. And one would ask, we had yesterday this definition of yoga, and the definition was not union with one's highest self. What was it? Do we remember from the discussion, those of us that were here?
Union from pain. Separation from pain.
Separation from the union with pain. That's a good one, yes? Because in the worldly life, and here's Arjuna's situation. So Arjuna is a great warrior. Arjuna is a great person. He's so strong. Everyone in society looks up to him. How wonderful he is. He lives the Dharma. He's been schooled by the best archer in the world. Society reveres him. He passed the greatest test. He passed the greatest test. He had to leave the kingdom which he and his brothers had ruled dharmically for 12 years. They had to leave as a part of a deal, in order to hope to have some rule back. And then for 1 year, he had to hide out and be unseen. He worked as a dance instructor for 1 year.
Wow.
That's the story. That's Mahabharata. So undiscovered. So he's a great man. Everybody in society looked up to him. And what happened? He had to face his duty, and what happened? He broke. He crashed to the floor, below the floor. He's a sniveling baby saying, I need to run away.
He freaked out.
He freaked out. There's Kartikeya's high-tech term. He absolutely freaked out. Now, are we actually going to be better than him?
No, I don't think I do.
You see, that's the point. Is we think something about ourselves and what we're to do and the importance of this and the way I'm going to build my life and I'm going to make this great life. But that's not what it's about. And so in trying to build this great life, we do what? We freak out. We say, I'm not up to this. Huh? Because you can't control your circumstances. Huh? And sure enough, that test is going to come. And if that test isn't good enough and you pass it, then the next one is going to have to come. I'm using this phrase for these tests right now. These tests that we've had over the last couple of weeks. Some of us passed them, and some of us have not passed them yet. Huh? We will. We'll face it again and again and again until we do. And that's Arjuna. And so Arjuna finally through grace, he realized, oh my God, Lord Krishna, you're here. Huh? I can't do this. What to do? That's it. Now, what do you suppose right now, chapter 6, if you were to look at the two of them, Lord Krishna and Arjuna, what's the position? What do you see? Is Arjuna still full of his stuff? Is he still crowing about how great he is?
He's trying to listen.
He's not starting to listen. Yeah, Shravana. He's listening with rapt attention, right? Because why? Because his life depends upon it.
Yeah.
Because he's seen that the best he can do, it will come to naught.
Well, Krishna's very convincing.
Well, and Krishna knows is the thing. Krishna knows who Arjuna really is. Arjuna is forgotten. And it's the same thing for everyone else here. You take this birth, you imagine yourself to be this body. You can say oneness all you want. But you're going to get tested on it. And will you pass? Or will you not pass yet? Right? This is it. COVID comes through. Wait a second. Who's it affecting?
The body.
But the test will come. And now what say thee? When the mind fog comes, when the pain comes in the body, when the fear arises, what say thee then? Huh?
I've been through worse. Saying that. Is this all you got? You're saying,
Yeah, Hari's practicing that one. It's a good practice. You just got to be ready. You have to be on your toes. Because at some point, we'll be given every test. And at that moment of death, that moment where it seems like abject despair, like there's no hope in this life anymore, where the pain is there, where the last breath is coming, will you remember who you are then? Huh? And so our dear Gopala used to say yes, 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 and then he had an experience and he said, oh my God, I'm not ready yet. So he redoubled his effort towards sadhana. I can't be full of myself. So the old tendencies are still there. But now he says, no, I can't do this. And so this gives us a little taste. Huh? Okay, so where are we? Teaching Lord Krishna. And now he's just extolled, he's talked about he's painted the Holy Grail for us, which is, he told us the inner state of the person who is transcending, who's come to this place of yoga, the inner state, undisturbed by what happens outside. A little taste. Paramahansa Yogananda, beautiful quote. He says, the yogi must be still in the midst of crashing worlds. And these are crashing worlds. And what is that inner state? Look at the inner state. That's your indicator. The inner state, you know? That's it. That's it. That's the weather vane. So look at that and see how it is. Look and see if you're able to still smile and feel undisturbed. And if you're not, okay, I just haven't passed the test yet, but I'm up to this. But not as something separate, right? We're going to have to listen to what the Lord is sharing. We're really going to have to absorb it. We're going to have to put it to the test. And then he's just shared what that inner state looks like when we're practicing, really practicing this yoga. This yoga isn't the asanas, you know. This yoga is the wisdom yoga of action and renunciation. The yoga that's being described, and this yoga of meditation, being steady, learning to be steady. And the last sloka that we covered, he said, so understanding this, understanding the potential for freedom, and that understanding that freedom is at hand based upon our own choices and based upon how we actualize our own choices. Then he comes back here, 24-25, which is now coming back to the practice. So he says, okay. 23 was, yoga means to disconnect your identification with that which experiences pain. Therefore, so that's another way of saying yoga is the end of the union with pain, the cessation of the union with pain. Mm-hmm. And recognize that everything here, it comes to pain. So, but there's a way to end that cycle, and that's yoga. So here, the way Swamiji translates, yoga is a means to disconnect your identification with that which experiences pain. Therefore, be determined to steadily practice yoga with a one-pointed mind. So therefore, be ready to be firm in your path. You know, what is your path? What is your life goal? Right? How are you going to go for it? If you don't have a life goal, what are you going to do here? We already have some experience with that, don't we? We already know it doesn't go well. And if my goal is a worldly goal, then I can attain it, but will that bring peace? No. So the goal has to be spiritual in order to be successful. Successful on the outside, so many different ways. Successful on the inside means satisfaction, the state of yoga that he's describing, the end of the cycle of pain. I'm going to read that sloka 23. I'd like to offer it in the word for word. Let's see here. 7th. That let him know a state of severance from union with pain, called by the name of yoga, that with determination should be practiced. Yoga with undesponding mind. Do we know what undesponding mind means? Do we know what despondent means? Sorry?
To be away. Like
Despondent.
despondent.
Dejected.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mataji? Depression. Despondent. Beside myself. Yeah. So mind obviously not steady. So undespondent mind. So firm conviction like that. Okay. That's that. Okay, let's continue on. 24 and 25. So it comes back to the practice. Here's what he shares. Abandoning without reserve all desires born of thought and imagination, and completely restraining the whole group of the senses by the mind from all sides. Kartikeya, a couple days ago, you asked that question about massage, free massage.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same as the croissant question when we tell the story of the French bakery that opens up in town. Which is, if you see the way it goes, then you say, at some point, I'm not going there anymore. If you see that through action with an intended result for myself, to gain pleasure from something or to avoid pain for something, that whatever that desire is, if I follow it and try to fulfill it, then what does it do to the mind? What does it do to the state of mind? And the answer, of course, is that it brings more disturbance into the mind. Because now I have something new, some new experience, which of course was not completely successful. But now I've added that to the mix in terms of the things to ruminate about that will visit me, right? Now I have that massage yesterday. Well, the massage tomorrow to imagine during the day. And then that massage yesterday with which to judge all other massages or other experiences in the future. So here Lord Krishna is taking us there. He's saying, so how to avoid that? Abandoning without reserve all desires born of thought and imagination, and completely restraining the whole group of the senses by the mind from all sides. So, in other words, an attitude, I don't want to go there. I'm not going there. Huh? Yeah. Little by little, let him attain to quietude by the intellect held firmly. Having made the mind establish itself in the self, let him not think of anything. So we'll take the commentary. But is there a visual? Having made the mind establish itself in the self, capital S self. Can you make your mind do something? Anything? Can you make your mind do something?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? You can. Have you been successful at making the mind do anything?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. By the way, there's an approach to doing it, correct? If you act as the mind's enemy, it's likely not to follow you so well. Can you make a dog do something?
Yes.
Yeah? Yeah, you do both, right? Is it true?
Yeah.
Yeah, you give it rewards and you practice austerities with it as well, correct? What's different? So, can you make the mind do whatever you wish for it to do? Of course you can. It just takes your steady resolve, you see. And what is this mind? This mind is this reactive, emotional center, which is always responding to whatever happens in a moment, right? And so one day I realized, oh my God, all this suffering, that I had made this mind myself. I visualized this because of the electronics background. I visualized this all in computer terms. This is one of the ways that we'll relate to it. So there's a program that's running, and I wrote the program. So that's speaking of a higher faculty, intellect, and the lower faculty, the subconscious mind. And I wrote it. Yes. But then the realization but there is a light. There is a super program. The light. And bringing myself into the light, this power of choice, intellect, then I can reprogram the mind. So now, what do? Well, I know that the self exists, capital S exists. I know that Krishna exists, right? So what do? I bring the mind into the self to rest in the self. So I bring it along. Here we go, right here. Can you visualize?
Yes.
So, and now the mind becomes what? Now the mind becomes an agent of the light. The training period is long. It's extensive. It's tests all the time. But without the test, how would you know whether you're done or not?
That's true. Yes.
So, sankalpa is the word introduced here, Sanskrit word, sankalpa. Swamiji says, sankalpa has been translated into thought, notion, concept, but simply it is when a thought is entertained and strengthened. The sankalpa is formed between the experiencer and an experience which takes place in the mind. So what we call our thoughts are not very different from imagination, yet throughout the day we think. So when we sit for meditation, we'll often say, set a sankalpa, which is a thought. Sankalpa is simply a thought. Doesn't mean a good thought, doesn't mean a bad thought. It doesn't mean a thought that will lead you towards freedom, and it also doesn't mean a thought that will bind you. It's simply rumination on a thought. And what happens when we ruminate on a thought, when we entertain a thought, what happens is that thought takes prominence in the mind stuff. The more you ruminate on it, the more you reflect on it and consider it, the more it engages a larger and larger portion of the awareness. And then finally, it will manifest in some way. So this is, we could say, law of attraction. This is how it happens. First, it manifests in the mind itself. So the more you ruminate on a particular thought, and the thought is just like a cloud, it can just be passing by, but you can catch it and ruminate on it. That is, start to consider it. So the thought could be, I'm going to lose my job tomorrow. It could just be passing by, and you could see it, and that could be a trigger to a fear. And the fear would have you, it will invite you to ruminate upon it, to reflect upon it, to consider it. And if you choose to do so, you still have choice, but if you choose to do so, then it will get bigger and bigger, and it will preoccupy your awareness, right? And when it gets bigger and bigger, then the mind, what you call mind, becomes of the nature of that thought. So the mind itself becomes the fear of losing the job. It gets bigger and bigger, and then of course finally it has to, because now you're preoccupied with it. So now it has to manifest physically, but it already manifested. It already manifested in the thought realm. You had already become in union with it earlier. Because at some point, that's all that there was thought about.
Yeah.
So COVID, like this. And we see it. And so, stay away from it, far away from it, run away from it. I don't mean run away from other people, wear a mask and take vaccine. I mean, those things are fine too. But I mean, run away from that thought, because when you ruminate on it, it just gets bigger and you become COVID. That's how it's transmitted, by the way. Because you become one with it. And then whoever you come into contact with, you give them the opportunity as well.
Yes. Yes.
It's not that hard. But in the same way, if you bring a different kind of thought in and ruminate upon it, so you bring a thought of an ideal, you bring a thought about the presence of God, the presence of Krishna, then the same way, this is what mantra does, Then the same way, it's also a sankalpa. You see, the term sankalpa is neutral. It's just speaking to the process of coming into union with something, the mind coming into union with something. So, and we say when we study thought power, that there are these relationships with the thoughts that are coming. So relationships meaning, well, you can let it pass by, where you refuse to have a real relationship with it, but also you entertain it, which means it comes and then you say, well, that's interesting. And generally triggers within knots in the psyche will cause them to be more or less interesting. So it triggers something, it triggers some deeply held fear or some anticipation that this might happen, like that. We were discussing something yesterday, right? Yeah. So then that thought is lying just under the surface, and so, or that tendency, vasana, is just under the surface. And so if a thought comes through, that will trigger that arising.
Yeah.
And then we'll feel pulled towards that thought. That's the way the instincts are manifesting, right? Instinctive behaviors. Yeah. So there's the tendency to be angry. For example, when someone says a certain thing. And it lies under the surface, but then when someone says the certain thing, then that feeling arises. But you still have a choice, you see, which is you can bring a counter sankalpa.
Yes.
You can bring a counter thought. Now, mantra is one of the best to use. You just bring it at that point. Or you bring the thought which is always available to have compassion. Or the remembrance that, wait a second, I'm not this. I'm not this body. I'm not going there. I am the immortal Atman. I am spirit, ever free. I'm not bound to this. I'm not bound to repeat these old behaviors. We're setting new behaviors now. We're living life in a new way. These are also thoughts that are available to you, right? And so these are also available as sankalpas. So positive thinking, for example, this is the technique. So just to continue the commentary. So I'll read this first paragraph again and then the rest of it, and hopefully we'll put it into perspective and we can see how to practice this. Sankalpa has been translated into thought, notion, concept, but simply it is when a thought is entertained and strengthened. So I said entertaining a thought. There's also harboring a thought.
Yes.
Right? So typically these are self-degrading thoughts that will harbor and take shelter under. And it'll say something like, I'm not worthy, I'm not capable, I'm not up to this, I can't go there, like that. So, and we'll harbor it. What does it mean to harbor it? We'll hold on to it. That'll be our safe shelter. It's not safe, but that will be our place of shelter. That'll be our go-to place. So we'll harbor a thought. You see that? So this relates to the relative strength of the sankalpa. Okay. So, but simply it is when a thought is entertained and strengthened. The sankalpa is formed between the experiencer and the experience, which takes place only here. So what we call our thoughts are not very different from imagination, yet throughout the day we think. Suddenly we realize that life has been a slave to these sankalpa, these imaginary objects which give rise to cravings and desires. And we have painted a gruesome world in which we see friends, enemies, saints, sinners, and so on. And because this mind or sankalpa interferes, we do not know what is natural to us, and life is a struggle. The yogi, having determined this, constantly endeavors to withdraw himself into his own self, knowing that this is the greatest source of joy and satisfaction, whilst carrying on his normal activity in the yoga spirit. So doing our duty, but the inner world has changed. I don't do it to get something back anymore because I don't really need something anyway. Right? Because what I really need is here, and I need to stay here while I'm engaging in the world, while I'm doing what I need to do. That is what my master, Swami Shivananda, called his background of thought. So what is that background of thought? What is that underlying? What is the place from which the thoughts are arising? Are the thoughts serving you? And are they serving all, or are they enslaving you? And that will be determined by the background of thought. Even while he worked, lived, and enjoyed in the external world, as it were, he was established within the self, his own self. This swinging between meditation and life is Krishna's way of imitating their unity. One without the other is imperfect and incomplete. So the yogi sometimes will sit in meditation, but then has to be active as well, right? But the inner state, undisturbed. And it's a practice. Here it's being described as a practice. During the active state, the yogi tries to realize all this is God. That was the whoever joined the satsang talk on that I gave on, was it Friday morning? It was Sunday morning. Sunday morning yoga fun. That was the point of that talk, is how to see God, how to relate to God in every moment in an active life. And all of these different approaches to do, including the Vedanta approach, which is, well, I am the self, I am God at the deepest level, but also what is this? You remember? What is this? It's the 5 elements. It's not a hand, guys. It's not a hand. As long as you continue to wish to relate to it as a hand, then you're bound. You have to see deeper. You have to see what's really here if you wish to be free. There's no hand here. Who's here? Brahman is here. Everything here is a manifestation of the One. You don't just skip to it. It's a practice. Right? How do I relate to what's really here in this active life? Well, the active life is required in order to find it. If you just sit and meditate all of the time, you'll touch God. But then as somebody screams, you will have forgotten all about it. If you can't master finding God in that scream, then you can't be there. Please.
Say that it was actually Osho. I think I put it on the feed yesterday. That meditation is all inclusive. The sounds, everything else. He said concentration is not. That's the first part of it, and everything. He said when you're in meditation, it's all inclusive. Nothing can disturb you.
Absolutely. Whether active or sitting. Whether active or sitting. So, to close, during the active state, the yogi tries to realize all this is God, but in order to prevent subtle attachment and self-delusion creeping in, during meditation, he tries to remove the consciousness of the all completely and remains rooted in the self alone, firmly holding on to the one God thought. All this is God. The mind drops all other thoughts and desires and remains serene. But God is not thought. Hence, even this has to be transcended. Beyond thought is a dimension quite different from all that has been thought of or expressed. Krishna, the supreme preceptor, points to that. Okay, Hariom Tat Sat. Okay, we should close. Any comment or question related?
I just wanted to say really quickly, the word restraint is just such a beautiful word because we see it in Patanjali, now we see it in the Gita with Krishna, and it's I read one commentary where the word restraint is actually in martial arts. When you're fighting someone, you restrain that blow that's coming at you. If you don't, it's going to smack you right in the face. And this is such a beautiful parallel of the thoughts, the rumination of the thoughts.
Yeah.
If you don't block those thoughts, it's just so that rumination is just going to take over. And then the harboring comes in and all of this. So it's a beautiful word, this word restraint.
Finally, the goal is to go beyond the thought into the true. Instead of dealing transactionally with the thoughts, but we deal transactionally with the thoughts in order to help approach that state. So, the thoughts are not you. None of them are. So they're veiling. It's just, and when we study Patanjali Yoga Sutras, we see that the thoughts are of 5 natures, one of which is thoughts rooted in truth. So the other 5 are all the other 4 are delusionary types of thoughts. So as a practice, we work to let the delusionary thoughts pass on by, and to focus the mind in the truth, and that helps us to let go of even those and reside in the truth. Okay, so let's close with Final Prayer and Arati, page 174. Having said that, there's an idea of thought. Swami Shivananda demonstrates a true yogi, Purna yogi, master of all of the yogas, but really for each of us, he demonstrates our own individual paths. And he's a master of all of the paths. And he can speak to us in our own individual path. We imagine a time without thought, but there's no such time. There's no such place, except nirvikalpa, that deepest state at the deep ocean bed, where only the deep ocean bed recognizes the deep ocean bed. It's a question of what am I using these thoughts for? What we're not seeing is we're using these thoughts to enslave ourselves until we use them as an offering. They're not ours, but they're tools in our hand. And so what Swami Shivananda demonstrates is developing a healthy relationship with thought, which is understanding that he's not the thoughts, but still utilizing the thoughts. For what purpose? Well, to bring us together, to bring us into the light. Is it not so? Yeah. So his thoughts are very much here, very much present. When you feel that uplifting vibration, here they are. All of the masters, certainly. But he embodies, for us, he embodies. So that helps us to relate to him. He's not somebody that died 100 years ago. He's one who mastered, not mastered, and shows us the way to self-mastery. So, okay, we should close. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rukneva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyamamritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rukneva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyamamritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Orvai Rukneva Bandhanan Mritor Mukshiyamamritat Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O adorable Lord of mercy and love, let us abide in thee forever and ever. On below Satguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki, and for all the saints and sages of all the traditions. Okay, short Arati, please.